Okay, you're back with me. Here we go again. Um, so welcome to Resilient Alpha, our podcast focused on the future of investing, where we talk with people in the world of family offices, endowments, foundations, philanthropy, money management. And today I have the pleasure to talk about something that I love, which is the business of Broadway. And I have with me a dear friend, Wendy Federman, who is, as Marty mentioned earlier, a 17-time Tony winner, which is, amazing, and has brought to life shows that a lot of us know. Dear Evan Hansen, the revival of Hello Dolly, because she's not old enough to have done the first one, I don't think. No, exactly. And Pippin. And she's also in the film producing business. Uh, there was a film called Wakefield starring Bryan Cranston, who a lot of people may know, and an upcoming film inspired by Lily Ledbetter, the fair pay advocate. In addition to her work on Broadway, Wendy has devoted herself to being philanthropic and spending time in a lot of endeavors outside of her direct business, including mentoring young people in your field, which is so valuable. And Wendy also, and I'm proud to say I'm a part of the project, we helped found the Museum of Broadway. And I highly recommend, if you haven't been, go. It's really terrific. And I was lucky enough that Wendy brought me along for the ride, but it's been really fun to be involved in.
I happened to just stop by yesterday. I was over on 45th Street, and it really is wonderful. And it's a standalone, or it's something that you can add in if you happen to be seeing a show that day. It's great with young people or people of any age, but it's not only just the history of Broadway and theater, but it's really the history of New York City in a lot of ways, because you really, it's just showing how, theater started downtown, and as the city grew, and Broadway became, shows went from vaudeville from 14th Street uptown, and how we became, as immigrants came over and brought their own culture and music and songs and stories with them, how it all evolved. So it's really just quite a wonderful place. It's theater, but it's then some. It's really history. And
I think it's important to point out it changes too. I mean, we've
yes.
got some permanent exhibits that go through some of what Wendy just talked about, but we bring in more relevant recent things as well.
We have the special room that also features, we change the exhibits and do some great things. And we're being used more and more now. Even a lot of shows are doing their announcements there, a lot of lectures. I know Lin-Manuel Miranda is a wonderful patron of us and does a lot of his events there. We recently I was at the 10th anniversary celebration for American in Paris. We had a reunion. So it's really become a very grounding for the industry. And again, it's just a wonderful thing to do. And I think we were just named again one of the top 10 pop museums in the United States. So again, it's just a matter of awareness. So now you know about it. Right next to, it's on 45th. It's right off of Broadway, between Broadway and 6th Avenue. So it's really,
it's really terrific. Okay, that's our shameless plug of our project. Let's get into the business of Broadway.
Absolutely.
People are coming to you all the time, pitching you plays, films, projects. We're an investment podcast, right? So we try to focus on the investment side of things, although we want to learn about the other parts as well. But what do you look for when somebody comes to you? What key metrics do you put around it?
I think even though it still is show business, so the product happens to be an artistic product. So obviously the first thing I have to look at is what is it? Who are you? What do you have? What is the, is it a musical? Is it a play? What are you presenting me with? What am I looking at? Whether I'm being sent a play, whether I'm being sent some music to listen to, whether there's something that's out of town or out of the country going, I saw this thing in this tiny little theater that just could be a germ of something great. So that has to be there. And then there's all the other elements. Then, of course, it's a lot about who has the rights, and if they do, what are the plans for it? Because again, like in any other business, it's who are your partners, who are you going to be working with, what's the future look like, what is it? Then you get, as the business has right now, we're in a particular, I call it a Hollywood moment. You get a major star who comes in and sort of says, listen, I've got 4 or 5 months and I've always wanted to do this play. And a lot of times it doesn't matter. I don't say it doesn't matter what the materials, they usually pick something worthy, but in saying that, that has become for right now, especially. I know I'm part of Waiting for Godot, which we're in rehearsals. We start previews on Saturday. It's Keanu Reeves and Alex Winter. Now, Keanu in particular has
Went to high school with Alex Winter, if you can believe that.
and he's got a film out that he just directed too. He's really
Those of you who don't know, Alex, he was in Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure.
well, they were Bill and Ted, and apparently, which is great. And why some of you gentlemen are laughing, because it's very rare that we have a lot of guys who are saying, I'll go to that Broadway show. It's usually, someone else in the family that's dragging them. But that's what's really interesting is that, and then you have somebody like my 30-year-old son, who is a Matrix and John Wick fan, who's going, I don't care what he's in. He could read the phone book. I want to be in the room. That's not the usual entertainment that that I would say in the artistry wise, although of course it's one of the most brilliant and unusual plays ever written, Beckett play. But again, that's become a little bit of something that's got popular last year when George Clooney came to Broadway. I was part of Glengarry Glen Ross, and that was, had a couple of big names in there. So that's something where, it's a short term, you're going to get in, the likelihood of making some money is pretty strong. So that's a certain type of theater investment. But from my heart and my soul, some of the shows you mentioned, the Dear Evan Hansen's, the Band's Visits, the Hades Towns, those shows like that are ones that are not branded. So you're developing from the beginning, but they actually can have a much longer financial tail, because it's not just the Broadway.
They go on tour.
Well, it's the Broadway one, right? It's the national tour. It's London. It's the A productions. Then you can get into what we call the reproductions. They're full reproductions, or we get into the licensing. I was a part of a musical based on the Addams Family. That was 2010. And originally on Broadway, it was Nathan Lane and BB Newirth. I believe we're still running in Mexico City. So there are still checks coming out. It's being done in Spanish. It's been translated. Some shows get translated into dozens of languages. And then we have the next slam. You have the non-equity tours. Then you go down and you have your local theater group.
Non-equity tours, for those who don't know, are cheaper to produce.
Non-union.
Non-union.
Yes.
They're non-union.
Mm-hmm. But there's still licensing money coming back into the original. Then you've got universities, camps,
high schools,
all of that. So there's money that just can keep filtering in. So again,
and you look at a show like Hamilton, right? There's 10, 12, 15 touring companies worldwide at one time.
And Hamilton hasn't even gotten to the world of the non-equity tour yet. So the lifespan it may never. I'm sure Wicked, is extremely well protected, but these are shows that somewhere down the road for the grandchildren and possibly great-grandchildren of initial investors may still be receiving checks. I know the night when we had the Hello Dolly revival, when we had the opening night, a friend of mine happened to be like the great niece of one of the original writers from the 1960 production, and her family was still receiving income. So again, so it depends how you look at it. And I guess the way that I look at what sings to me, pardon the pun, but that type of artwork. But then, of course, it's still show business. So I look at things that, of course, for myself and for my investors, make sense as an investment. And I try to do a combination of everything, in one season. And we call a season in Broadway, a season would be from Tony Award to Tony Award. So I try to have offerings that are a little bit of both. There are many times I'll have people that are investors or people that know what I do and haven't invested, but read about something and they're interested. And I'll go, oh, let me check into it. Or, oh, I reviewed it already and I just can't recommend it. Similarly to the way you would call your broker or anybody, or if you're looking for real estate. And I always tell everybody, because it seems like, especially in the metropolitan area, everybody eventually gets pitched a Broadway show. And I've been doing it long enough where you got to talk to Wendy. Ask Wendy, she'll know about it. And
you must get one text a month from me about stuff like that.
And I'll usually give you and again, it's not always, sometimes I will actually say, the show actually could be good, but I don't trust the people running it. And again, it's like any other businesses that you're all in, you're around long enough, who the good ones are, the bad ones, if they, how they treat their partners, how they treat their investors. And a lot of times, and especially I learned a lot during shutdown, during that time.
I was going to ask you about that. So maybe we'll skip around since we're.
Well, just talking about, again, as in any business, who you want to partner with and who you want to be in the room with and sign your name with. They were just partners that really were very up and aboard. And if monies came in and things came in, they took care of it. And there were other ones that just really took good care of themselves. And the list got longer of, no, I don't care what you call me up and ask me to partner with. I'm not interested. I know how you work.
What were your big take? I mean, that's obviously one takeaway from the pandemic in terms of how people behaved and character. Warren Buffett always likes to say, when the tide goes out, you know who's wearing a bathing suit, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think he says it more eloquently than I just did. But, how do you, what were your other takeaways? What, lessons learned from what was a really hard time for all business, but Broadway and the arts in particular?
Well, I think any industry that relied on people being in a room together certainly were affected the most. I think what a lot of us learned was we really need this. We like being in these rooms. It's great that the technology is better. And for the people that couldn't get into the city today to be able to watch this, now that we really improved it, that we can have meetings, because a lot of times on shows, I'm working on a show now that we're going to open in Manchester. And Manchester in the UK, not in New Hampshire. So I'm able to zoom in sometimes early morning and catch a little bit of a rehearsal, so I don't have to be there. So the technology part was good, but what we of course know that we missed is the energy of being in the room together, and what we get out of being just as humans and as people, and what we can do. And it's the little conversations here and there, and it's what the creatives can do in that room, and that's happening. But people, now that once things started reopening, what we really found is that experiential experiences became more important than stuff. And especially now, we found that our demographic got younger. For ticket buyers, it used to really be the more, I would say, 40 to 65, primarily female ticket buyer, but the age skewed younger. A few reasons understandable. A lot of people of a certain age just said, I'm out of New York, I'm out of the metropolitan, I'm going down south, wherever they went. But a lot of younger people, which is why entertainment is gearing a little bit younger at this time, which we can talk about. But we also found that now, and coming back, they're spending money. They want the experience. They want to be at shows. They want to be at concerts. They want to be at the best seat at the best restaurant. They want people want great vacations, because we realize the fragility of being able to do this and being able to go and to do. And part of that is a good thing for theater, which makes me believe that live theater has been around since the ancient Greeks and will continue to be. No matter all the technology that comes in can only enhance how we do the productions and maybe in presentations to people that cannot get to a theater. But in saying that, I've seen some of my own shows dozens of times, and it's the same show, but it's the energy of the audience back to the people on the stage and backstage and the back and the forth that tweak that experience.
It's so funny. As you know, one of my daughter's very close friends' fathers is a big Broadway leading man.
Mm-hmm.
And he will sometimes come out, he played Billy Flynn in Chicago on and off for 10 years. And he would come, we would have dinner, between the shows, if the kids were with us. And he'd say, God, that was awful at the matinee today. The audience could have been worse, made my job so much harder.
Right. It's so true. In fact, we even have the demographics. I mean, I laugh sometimes reading the stage managers' reports, but we really kind of know the difference between a Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday audience. Who buys what performances. We know for matinees, they either skew with older people or, pending the show, very younger people. So we know that the intermissions are going to be longer. They know with certain shows that certain areas, that certain things get the laugh or get this response or get that response. And
can you tweak pricing by using that data?
Oh, 100%. Well, obviously, we find that weekends tend to be more expensive, I think, but I think that's in anything. It's in sports, any activity, the weekend will be more expensive. I think that we have pretty much found, and I usually tell people, Wednesday evenings, for some reason, tend to have the most availability and maybe the most variation on price. But we've really gotten to the point of dynamic pricing, similarly on an airline, where
it's probably because it's midweek, right? A Tuesday's an add-on to a long weekend on one side, and a Thursday is an add-on to a long weekend on the other side.
Maybe there's a thing that, there's that Wednesday and matinee has gotten together, but wherever it is, the Wednesday seems to be a little bit there seems to just be more avail on a Wednesday traditionally, unless of course you have a huge, again, like Keanu Reeves coming in, that every performance is going to be
Right.
a fairly sold out performance.
So I want to talk about a little bit about theater versus film, because you've done both. And I know in our family office network, people get pitched both all the time. We tend to see families being more open to investing in theater than film, because of the runs like Tours, and whereas film seems like the investment decision is more binary. I wonder if you have thoughts on that. And how do you think about it how is it different if you're deciding to invest in a film versus a Broadway show?
They're so different. The only thing to me that they have in common is the fact that there's artistry, there's actors, there's an entertainment. The business is just run incredibly different. What I find that theater is cleaner and clearer in terms of when we capitalize a show. We include the publicity, everything is in there. It's much cleaner in film. And again, there's a difference between the studio film, the independent film, and of course now with all the streaming service deals, that's kind of added another crink into it. When you sell the film, you really don't know what the other costs are going to be. So I think it's a little less clear on how and when investors are getting paid back. I mean, there are certain ones that I've done that have been kind of clean. We've made a film, especially on the documentaries. You make it, you sell it, we get a number, that's it. There may not be any more than that, but if you've done it right, you make
what it is,
a ka-ching, and you're good. You're sort of good to go.
And the genres are increasingly intersecting, right? I mean, there are projects like Which Way to the Stage. We're seeing Broadway shows become films, whether it's Wicked to becoming a film, but that's also based on a book, or Hamilton going to
the Wicked
Rent
was made into a musical. So money should have been paid to the creative team that should have trickled down to the investors in the stage, if it was in their initial operating agreement. When they filmed Hamilton, that was a direct deal with Disney, and yes, it did bring benefit to anybody that was in the original mother company. It just depends if you're filming the actual show or you're taking it and it's being rewritten for screen. And a lot of it is, I tell everybody, read your operating agreement, especially with film plays, yes, but with a musical, if you're, just see if the film rights are included. Like sometimes people ask me about cast albums, and sometimes the show produces it or the show offers investors the opportunity if they want to invest in a cast album. But a lot of times it's just a separate label that comes along and does it. And there's a slight benefit to the show through the licensing, but it's just different. So again, that's just the operating agreement on the show.
And you've been in this business a long time. No one would know it looking at her, but she has. And you've seen the business side of theater evolve. And we've spent a lot of time here talking about how the investment world has evolved or continues to evolve. How do you see technology changes like AI and blockchain affecting how theater or film is either created, or how you think about investing in it?
Well, I think there's been a much larger probably changes in television and film, just because it makes sense. It's that technology, then you've got this crossover of the sphere in Las Vegas, which is sort of taking the next step in live entertainment. I mean, I have to figure out in my schedule. I'm so curious to see what they did with the Wizard
I know,
of Oz.
I'm dying to go.
I'm upset that they took out the 35 minutes because I'm not sure where, but I'm just, again, curious to see that intersection of this most beloved film and of how they did it, but the presentation of feeling the hurricane and how you feel with the house lands, in Oz. In terms of theater, again, if you go to a show, if any of you have been to Stranger Things or to Harry Potter or to some of our other, the newer shows, what we've just been able to do with presentations, sometimes with conversation, as the technology's gotten better, is, maybe we can have less actors, and maybe because we can do it through visual techniques. So, will it help in cost savings without taking away from the storytelling? Because if you're still asking somebody to pay $150, $200, whatever dollars to come see a live show, we don't want to give them all, technology. But on the other hand, I think the technology can only enhance the storytelling in a theatrical piece and maybe allow us to do something. I mean, Stranger Things could not have been done probably 10 years ago, but what they're doing in that theater now, I'll say Netflix, the one here, Netflix paid for it themselves. It's insanely expensive, which they
It's
can
like the
do.
Nickelodeon shows. And
Well, but again, they can do it because I think it's really a promo for their TV show, and they make, they're from another industry, but the technology that they've employed has really, I guess, if you're a fan of the show, it's sort of upped the level of the experience. So again, for us, when we're looking at our shows, regular just theater producing, we are looking at where and that's where we rely on our scenic designers and our audiovisual designers and all of those people, because they're the ones that are on top of that and sit with the director and the creatives and producers and go, okay, here's where we'd like to wind up budgetary. It's this combination of what do we want to spend versus how can we get there, and what tools can we use that will make it more exciting for the audience, enhance the storytelling. But again, they're not coming to a movie, they're coming to a live show. So we want to be sure we're not taking away from that.
And it's interesting. You brought up the Sphere, right? Which is kind of a combination of a movie and a live show. Do you see more? And we had a company speak at one of our prior conferences who is putting up, I would say, very mini Sphere-like experiences in different places, and that company was more focused on, kids and teens. But do you see more and obviously the Sphere is huge and special, whatever, but do you see more venues that are Sphere-esque coming in the future?
I remember as a kid being out in LA. I was in LA, but it was a big deal when they had the theater. There was a movie theater on Sunset Boulevard, the Cinedome. But the big deal was at the time that all of a sudden, like the film, for those David Lean kind of movies, you could have that cinemascope, that wide angle. So sure, there are going to be things. There are certain shows that want to go to Broadway because they want to get the Tony Award and they want that recognition, but might be better served. And as smart producers may think about going over to Randall's Island or something like that and setting that show up in a larger way and in a different way, and in a way where they don't have to deal with Broadway costs or reaching a Broadway theater, but can offer that more of a unique experience. That's also very big in conversations on certain shows that are larger musicals or a Stranger Things. Netflix wanted it as a Broadway show. Could they have done it for less money if they would have set it up somewhere in Brooklyn or Long Island City? For sure.
So you're known for finding new talent and then mentoring. I mean, I remember our friend Jill Furman, right, has a great story about Lin-Manuel Miranda. And somebody says, oh, you've got to go see this guy. He's doing something in the basement of a church in Harlem. And, Jill says, I'm not going to this thing. Like, I hate everything anyway. But somebody convinced her to go. And she goes to the basement of a church in Harlem. And there was Lin-Manuel Miranda in what became his first big Broadway hit. And she immediately saw it. So how do you seek out the new talent? And then how do you help mentor them?
Again, if it's coming to the creatives, it's kind of similar in a way. I mean, there's a young, someone I play.
You go to a lot of church basements?
Well, someone, you actually, that's what you do that at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival for sure. You're in attics and in basements of everything. There's over 3,500 little shows, and everybody's looking for that next, Six is a huge musical on Broadway that came out of the Fringe Festival. So everybody's looking for that unique, and they were both seniors in university, and that was their thesis. And
that's like the Spice Girls on Broadway meets your history book.
Unbelievable. What they thought up of, and a very smart producer saw it and said, I can help you make that better. And then it just evolved and it evolved. I have someone I played tennis with years ago who called me up and said, my grandson's a brilliant and genius, and he's at Juilliard. Would you listen? Oh, I listen. I'm following this kid. He's Sondheim-esque. That's all I can say. You kind of just sort of never know. And yes,
could be the next Andrew Garfield.
Could be. You go to Joe's Pub and you go here and you go there and you listen to who your other friends are. That's the way a friend of mine's son is the manager of Billie Eilish, but heard her on, maybe it was a Spotify or something like that, and she was 13 or 14 and just heard one of her things out there. But that's just how you find it. But it's the same way with writers. It's the same way with an obscure script, and it's really hard to read everything and find everything, but it's trying to be there.
Maybe it's a little, it is hard, but maybe also social media. I mean, I remember going to the Cheetah Rivera Awards a couple of years ago when the Miles Frost, who played Michael Jackson, the first Michael Jackson and MJ
Won the
on
Tony
Broadway,
Award, yep.
won the Tony and won the Cheetah Rivera Award, which is effectively the Tony Award for dance. And he came up to accept the award and he looked at Christopher Whelan, who was the choreographer, and he said, "You were my first dance lesson ever." And they found this kid on TikTok.
Well, basically, they did a national search. You know, I'm part of, took the film Purple Rain, and it's going to be a big musical on Broadway coming in the spring. We're opening in Minneapolis in a couple of weeks. And again, it was a national search. So you're never going to find that one talent that's going to do it all. But if they have enough, and if you can train them, if they're a great singer and they can act, and you teach them to act. With Miles, I remember sitting with his mom, and I also just great singer, composer in his room with his guitar kind of thing, sent in an audition tape. And when Christopher Wheeldon met him and saw him, and he felt he could move it well enough that he felt he was teachable.
Right.
And he went on to win a Tony, and I'm sure he's got a huge career, and a lovely young man, but I'm sure he's got a huge career.
Oh, I'm sure.
Ahead of him. So again, you know, you have to be especially careful with doing a bio musical in particular, because you know, you don't want to know someone that's an imitation, but you want to get close enough to it that you're not upsetting the people that revered. And then, you know, I remember, you know, Ben Platt's story, who he had been around. He played it. He never had
Ben Platt was the lead in Dear Evan Hansen.
But he had been he had like come up in Book of Mormon, but he came in as like the third go round of stars. So he wasn't like a big name at all. And when they asked him to audition, for The Friend. They did not ask him to audition for Evan. And I guess they saw quality in him and said, you know, sing this.
They saw their Evan, yeah.
Sing this other song. So, you know, you hear all these amazing, remarkable stories of how people, then there's always the great understudy story, Sutton Foster. You know, that's how in Thoroughly Modern Millie, they were out in San Diego and someone hurt their leg and she went in, and now she's huge star. But that goes back to the Shirley MacLaine story, that she's the original first story of how somebody became a huge big star because the understudy broke their ankle.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart or skilled. But you have to be skilled to be the understudy. And by the way, and I know you know this, Wendy, the understudies and the swings are the hardest working people on Broadway.
My heroes, because they save shows. There was one time, it's always known that like the first week or two of January, you're going to have a lot of people out, because a lot of times over the Christmas holiday weeks, we do 9 shows. So everybody's not only performing a lot, but of course they're going to holiday functions. I took friends. I went to the first week of January, took some friends to see Tina Turner. Not only was the real Tina, our number one, out, understudy came in, she got sick. It was the standby to the understudy, did the second act flawlessly. And I just said to people around me going, I think you may have seen something historical here, because
and what a lot of people
3 Tinas in one show.
Well, yeah, and what a lot of people don't realize is often the swings switch out for people because they twist their ankle when they're in the middle and they have to be ready to go and come right out. But I know we have a question from the audience,
so I got 2 questions and comments. You did a great job, and just talking about it, and we have a Tony Award in our family too, because my daughter was producing. But you know, we looked at 2 different, and you're looking at technology. And if you think about I think the first show that we came across that was recorded was Memphis. They made a recording of that show. And meanwhile, it still stayed on Broadway, but it cost over $2 million to record it, because you had to pay the actors 3 times, with union dues. So with the technology that exists today, with all the streaming and content that's being built up, why are we seeing more of that, where you could take a show, and take those elements and keep it going? That was one portion. And the other thing I always thought was, on the shows that we invested in, why aren't they just built to travel and come onto Broadway first, so that they have the Broadway label and then go on to tour? Why? Because the touring, you don't have the 90%, it costs so much to be on Broadway, whereas all these subscription houses can make money if you take a show. So,
well, first of all, we do the tour after Broadway, but what happens is, I've had shows like Ain't Too Proud. We were waiting to get a Broadway theater. So we started in Berkeley. We knew there was going to be a wait. There was 3 theaters that we wanted that had good shows in them. So we wound up making very good deals, and we went to Did we go to Toronto? I know we were at the Kennedy Center, but I know we had 3 stops before Broadway. And then we did go on tour. So you go to Broadway to get the title on Broadway. There are a lot of shows that are just do tour. For example, I'm part of Beetlejuice. Now, Beetlejuice did Broadway. The national tour, and then, you know, COVID happened. The national tour has been very successful. We are coming back to Broadway October 8th.
Well, Beetlejuice, you lost the theater, I think, right?
Yeah, well, that was a whole nother thing. The long, Winter Garden. Yeah. Yes. But the tour's been good. But the point is, on the tour financing, we are coming back to Broadway for 4 months on the tour, and then we'll leave Broadway, and then we can go and continue part of the tour. You know, and it's interesting, even though Memphis was the first film, but they've been filming shows for decades, and they're all at the public library over there. And I have nothing but admiration for Sue Frost. So I'm sure that whatever could have been done was done. But that show, as you know, did not recoup on Broadway, but I think you did okay when it went out.
And I think also some of the shows that are done before a show comes to Broadway the first time are sort of dress rehearsals.
You can't
often those shows change a lot.
If you fail on Broadway, there is not a great history at all of shows that open directly on Broadway. And I know from my own personal experience, it is really, and off Broadway, you know, being out there before Broadway could even be being in a theater in New York City, just not a Broadway theater. I mean, Hamilton was at Joe's Pub, Band's Visit was at the Atlantic. Again,
a lot of things start out at the Public downtown.
It's just a matter of getting, I mean, Dear Evan Hansen, we were at the Arena Stages in Washington, then we are at Second Stage, just on the other side of 8th Avenue. But again, you're getting that audience reaction, you're getting that time to get it right. You build it into the capitalization, you build it into your costs, but you know, you only have one shot to open on Broadway. And that's sort of your key. I know I have been involved with shows like The Addams Family, where the Broadway show got mediocre reviews, but because it was Nathan and Bibi, we got up to maybe 80% or so recouped. But the National, they actually worked on the storyline. They made the second act much better, and the tour went out and did much, and it actually was a better show and went out and did better.
And that happens. I mean, Harry Potter obviously opened on Broadway because it's Harry Potter and who owns it, et cetera, et cetera. They
choose to,
but after the pandemic, what they realized after it was 2 shows that you had to go to and 2 tickets you had to buy, they realized it was better as one show. Well, so when they came back after the pandemic,
what we also realized is, and I produce as well in the UK and London and all of that. And American audiences and UK audiences are very different. A UK audience, no offense to us, but they will have the patience and the tolerance, and they love their theater the same.
Tend to be more intellectual also.
Yeah, and you know, they're just it's in the education. They will go to part 2. They are delighted to spend the full day and evening. We know Americans, we want it. In fact, the big trend now is, can we do this without an intermission? Can we do it in 100 minutes? And some shows you can. The Band's Visit was 100 minutes of pure perfection. It just didn't need an intermission.
It really was.
It told the story. Other ones, there was an absolute moment, whether it's a play or a musical, where you know, outside of the fact that you need the time for the storytelling, but you know that here's the big moment. And yes, there's a reason that people will come back after that 15 minutes, you know, to see what happens. So again, you know, it really depends on you. You have to serve the art. You still have to serve the creation.
We have another question.
Wendy, I have the misfortune of all 3 of my children as thespians, but they're doing okay. My oldest son led. That's why I'm still working at. The event of some of this AI has worried my son, David Abelis, is my son. I don't know if David Abelis, if you know his name. He was Ron
David
Weasley,
Abelis.
Ron Weasley on Harry Potter for several years, and also led the music in Once, and was on the stage. So they got a lot of Tonys and everything, but what he presented with me the other day was very disturbing to him and to me. Exhilarating but disturbing. There's one of the AI packages is called Suno. So he comes to the house. We just had twin boys through my younger son, who's also an actor, straight actor. And he says to this software, compose a song in this genre with this kind of voice and this kind of thematic consistency with the theme of their names, Henry and Benjamin.
This is how people come up with bat mitzvah slogans too, by the way.
And it came up, I'm telling you, it came up with songs that a composer would be ecstatic with. And this, I was on the board of Musical Theatre Works when it still was around. And, we tutored and showcased shows like In the Heights and what have you. But I was astounded at the quality and the attractiveness of the product.
So I think the question is, what do you think that these AI tools mean for the creatives on the writing side?
Listen, it is definitely an issue for creatives and even for the actors, when part of their reason for their strike was because, if they're doing a crowd scene, instead of being able to get like a day wage for being there, they were worried that, their faces, their images need to be protected. I cannot argue with you. I'm not the creative, but I cannot argue with you that, ChatGPT has changed, and all of those, it has changed a lot. What can be written and in the way that it can be done is quite amazing. And I'm not quite sure how going forward the creatives will protect themselves. It's just going to be, it's going to be a bit of a challenge on that note. I know when I go in a room and somebody, I'm presented music from a creative, that's what we judge on. And that's what we're looking at. How that's going to affect the future for writers, I don't know.
It's a challenge for sure.
It is going to be a challenge for creatives.
I'm going to go over here.
Hi, Marina Schwabik. I'm actually from Beverly Hills or Los Angeles, and I work for a single family office. I was in the film business, and my question to you is, as a businesswoman, producer, money is important, but also you are on the creative side making those decisions. And I know from my experience, when you have to cut something or bring something new, how do you make those decisions, having in mind your investors and obviously reporting to them ultimately the bottom line?
Of course. Well, it's very interesting. There's a big difference between theater and film and television.
Yes.
In theater, writers are the most protected. And meaning, even if it's a musical, you cannot change as a producer. I can't go over there and say it should be the thing. I can't be it's got to be the no. Even if it's material that's in an estate, you have to deal with the family, the estate attorneys and the family, because a lot of the revivals that are coming out are being given a twist. And some of the estates are thrilled about it because they know that, oh, that's a great idea. People will enjoy seeing it now. Yes, please, we'll approve the changes. Sometimes they won't. I know when we did American in Paris, it took quite a while because it was the two Gershwin families and to get them to get along to agree until we got it. So in terms of, film is different. Well, TV, again, film is
theater lives, right? There's more than one
film,
MJ over time. There's more than
you
one
can be a writer for hire. So again, right. So it really depends if you're a writer and or director. And in film and TV, you get much more the writer and director being the same. And especially in TV, the showrunner, who can be the producer, could also be the writer. So we don't have that as much in theater. It's a little more separate, church and state. It's much more in film and TV. So again, if you're a director, writer, whomever of note, you can have in your contract, no edits, you cannot edit or change a word unless I say so. I mean, that goes back to the old days from, I wasn't in film at that point, but when Harvey Weinstein was, that he would just mercilessly, somebody wanted to make the deal badly enough, they'd make the deal, but then he'd mercilessly come with a scissor. You cannot do that in theater. Theater, that is, again, for the Writers Guild, that is the most protection for writers. But again, a lot of writers love theater and go to film and TV and whatnot because the payout can be much larger for them, or if they get a TV series, or if it's a big film. But again, it depends on the contract. But again, going in that you're a writer for hire. But again, now if you watch the crawl, if you watch the credits, you're going to notice that a lot of times the director and the writer and the producer, you're going to see a lot of the same name coming up. Because, and this way that they do have more creative control. But of course, you want to make it, like with a show, a lot of times, especially with a musical, or with a play, it's just too darn long. And you've got to go and figure out with your writer or songwriters what comes out. Many a well-known actor has been told your solo has to go. In fact, it's interesting, when we did Cinderella on Broadway, Cinderella was originally written as a 58-minute TV piece. The original one was with Julie Andrews. We were turning it into a 2.5-hour musical. And with the permission of, like, the Hammerstein Rogers estate, they were thrilled. We needed more songs to make it longer. They gave us songs from shows where the songs had been cut over the many decades of shows they'd written, where it's a beautiful song, but we need to shorten it. It doesn't, the old expression in musical theater is it moving the story along? Is there a reason for this person to really be singing it? And we got to get the show down to 2 hours and 40 minutes. But anyway, we made a full musical using about, I'd say, 7 or 8 songs that were composed for other musicals, but thematically fit into the storytelling of what we did.
So I think that's a great transition, because before our podcast gets too long or our panel gets too long, or, are we good? I don't know. All right. So then we'll take some more questions.
All right.
I just wanted to make sure.
So my question is just about the business.
Yeah.
In the movies right now, all the famous actors, they are also producers. So I thought the producer is the one that organize and get everything done in the movie. So they cannot be a producer because they need to act. I mean, why?
Oh.
I mean, I think they're becoming producers. Maybe they get a piece of the action. How does that work?
It works interestingly, because a lot of times you'll know that there's, I just happened to finish. It took me a while, for any of you who did Barbara Streisand's book, but, talk about producing, directing, and starring in it, how she would, had trusted people around her, because as a director, well, she produced it because it was her idea. She really wanted it. She got the elements together. She got the set, the location, traveled with the location people to find the places. And I'm using her as an example, but for any of that. And it's more doable in film and TV. Again, you hardly ever see that in theater at all. Again, you have your line producer, you're a producer on it, but you can also have your line producer is really your right hand on a film anyway. And they will get the shot set up. They will have it all done. You'll have your rehearsals, but then the star, if it's a director star, they can go, like Clint Eastwood does it quite often. They can go over and be in the scene. They've rehearsed it, but their line producer, all their people, all their light, their
They often
cameraman,
have doubles,
but
filling in while they're
cameraman, but
setting up.
everybody knows what the director wants, and they get it, and they probably do a couple of takes, and the magic happens in the editing room. In terms of producing, it's interesting. A lot of times you're going to see a big actor's name as an exec producer, and I'm seeing it in a lot of these big TV series now. And, they're probably not doing the day in, day out work of a producer, but an exec producer serves a different function. A lot of times an exec producer may just be bringing money into the film, but with a lot of the big actors, they're bringing their name and their recognition, and it's part of their deal. You want me in this? You're naming me as an exec producer. And maybe that means that they're getting a little back end fee on the producer side as well. It doesn't mean that they're doing the hard line, what you're considering. As a producer, maybe I could be in the show. I mean, like last year, the show that won the Tony Award, Maybe Happy Ending, Darren Criss is a named producer. In fact, they asked him, I believe he made the speech at the Tony Awards. He was instrumental in the piece. He was excited about it. It was important for him because not only as being in it, but it was giving Asian actors an opportunity to be leads in a show, which was very important to him. He did bring in money to it, but his partners ran the day in, day out. I know his partners well. They ran the day in, day out, but he was consulted on everything. He was at a lot of meetings, didn't preclude him from being in it. It would be impossible to be your own, it's impossible. Even one-man shows on Broadway, there's a director. Film and TV are different because you have a team, you can rehearse. And again, the magic happens in the editing room. There's a documentary that I'm involved with now, which will be, God willing, huge, but I'm not allowed to talk about it yet. But the difference with theater and film, I kind of love theater more because you go from rehearsal to teching it out in the theater to the show, and you really become a family and you stay together. You can be on a film, and a film can take anywhere. Wakefield with Bryan Cranston, Jen Garner took us 3 weeks in Pasadena in California, inside in studio, and we used a set, a house for the set. We had to bring Brian in like 2 months later. We did 2 days in New York City, but basically until we went to Telluride for the film festival, We didn't see each other for months because the director and the editor go in a room and make magic. When you're doing a TV series, that's a little bit more like a theater piece because you're at least working together with your actors and your team for X amount of weeks. And then, of course, you go off, and then the magic is still happening in the editing room. I mean, a little different with if it's a live feed, like a sitcom, they'll usually do 2 of them in one day. And usually, again, the editors get together after and make sure they're culling out, putting together the best pieces of it. Theater, you're living together, really living together. That's why I'm also very careful, especially if I'm coming in on something early on. It's a marriage, like my 13 going on 30. We took the film 13 going on 30. In fact, I got Jen Garner to be a producer partner. And again, she's not doing day in, day out producing with us, but she's giving us her name. And what she's going to give us is, we've run everything by her. She's read the script. She's seen the music. We're cluing her in on all the rehearsals, but she is giving us, because of her affiliation with the film, the fact that she's putting her name on it is assigned audience people that, yeah, I think this is
Legitimate.
good. You love this movie. You love the movie. I'm telling you, come see the show. So again, a producer title can mean a lot of different
things. Marty has a question.
It's the last question. So we've done a lot of work. Ken Davenport, right? So he's raised a lot of money in our group. Actually, he's returned, good money. Even I think the Addams family worked out for people in our group, right? I guess he did Kinky Boots, right? So anyway, Mike, I have a ChatGPT question for you. Okay. Imagine you are a Broadway producer. Okay. You're surrounded by a group of family offices here and online, and we're giving you truth serum. What is one thing we should be looking for in an agreement with a Broadway producer as a family offices that typically we wouldn't be looking for in terms of getting a good deal from a producer? Clauses, rights.
I guess I'm so used to reading them. I would think you just want to see if it's something that's new that can have future rights to it. Like the Waiting for Godot, that's simple. They're doing it. These 2 big stars are doing it for 4 months. They're in, they're out. You make your money, but boom, you're gone. If it's something that's new that does have a future life, I guess I would be really sure to read about your future entitlements. I like to make sure for myself and for my investors that if we're starting in London, I want to be sure that myself and my investors, you have first rights, but not the obligation to invest in Broadway and in tours. So that would just be something that it should be there, but I would be sure.
Optionality.
Right. I would just be sure that option is there. I wouldn't want to find out that, oh no, we can go to anybody we want.
We became really successful before we got to Broadway, and now we're not letting you into the Broadway part because we don't need you anymore.
That I would say, it definitely is almost always in there, but that would certainly just, top of my head would be something that I'd want to be sure that, and I would also want to be reading the clauses for how many years you were the mother company was going to be as part of the royalty pool. So you kind of knew for how long you were going to, you could, if everything went well. And again, shows that leave Broadway that have not fully recouped can wind up recouping because the show has been out there, whether it be on the road, wherever it's been out on the road, and money's come back and get distributed. And that winds up putting the Broadway show over the top. And then that tour and those projects can make money as well. So
great stuff.
So I think the question from the audience is, what lawyer do you most recommend as theater lawyer?
I can give you a couple of names. There's a few that I work with. Some of them are busy. It depends. It depends because there are lawyers that are great just to do a quick read of your contract. And then there are ones that I really would go to, that we start with as the show that come up with the 50-page documents. So again, it would really depend, what somebody for a short term look at my contract. And is it for talent? Is it for someone in your case who's the talent, as opposed to, the one writing
the capitalization of the show,
so the operating agreement and the subscription agreement.
So we got to go to the lightning round.
That's what I was about to say, Marty. We're going to go to the lightning round. We have a few quick questions, quick answers. So what's a trend in theater or film that you think is overhyped?
I don't know about it being overhyped. And I think it's wonderful that these big names are coming in and giving an opportunity to see them live and to make, most likely to make money on those shows. But I don't want that to take away from people giving a chance to an unknown, unbranded the show that, I mean, nobody knew maybe happy ending. It struggled. And then now it's doing very well, won the Tony, to make sure that that you give, if you're going to buy, let's say 1 or 2 shows a season, if you want to see that big star, buy something, take a chance on a brand that you don't know. You read the reviews, but even if it's something that sounds that you're not sure, I've never heard of it, nobody knew. I had friends calling me up, what's this Evan thing? And then they couldn't get a ticket for 3 years. So give new projects, plays or musicals, give new things a chance.
Okay, so I don't want to ask you about projects you've been involved in because they're your babies, right? So not best and worst, but what's a project that you passed on that's like the one that got away? The one that gets you the most.
It kills me. My son wasn't feeling well at the time. This goes back to 2010. And I'm not a South Park fan, and they wouldn't let us read or see anything. And I could have had a nice piece of Book of Mormon.
That's okay. I walked out of that show.
I did eventually get money in it. Well, funny thing is, I went as a guest. I sat next to Kate Lear, Norman Lear's daughter, and Kate and I are sitting there going, "This really isn't our taste, but all these people, they're hysterical. This is going to do well. I'm shocked with this language." And she said her father was sitting in front of her. She said, "Norm, my father never makes a mistake. He backed these guys. He put in huge money, and he always wins." And I said, if I'd have known that 9 months ago, oh well. So yeah,
that's probably a good point. But that's probably a good point too for family offices thinking of investing. Think about who the lead producers are.
Well, you know what? And that was a little earlier in my career. I try to do a bit of a deeper dive, but every once in a while there is a surprise. And sometimes I will say that sometimes the shows that do win the Tony Award or whatever aren't always the more financially successful one. I did a revival of Driving Miss Daisy with James Earl Jones and Vanessa Redgrave. We were not even nominated for Best Play Revival, but we made 60%. We had a profit of 60%. So,
sometimes the arty things win the awards when the money-making things don't.
And that happens in Hollywood
the
all
Oscars
the time.
too,
the
yeah.
Oscars all the time. They hardly ever give it to the block. You knew there was no way Wicked was going to win for best, whatever you thought of it, because they were going to give it to something smaller and more artsy and more craftsy.
100%. Favorite Tony moment? You've been up there 17 times.
Well, you don't forget the first. When Hair won, that was just special. But there was a very special relationship among all of us, and we were actually a very politically active group. And Mike Gavin Creel, may he rest, he was a lovely actor who was really sort of the emotional linchpin of our group in the show, and we all loved and adored him. And he passed last year at 47. And so that just even heightened our memory of that one. But yeah, gotta remember you first.
If we time travel today to 2040. Right, which isn't that far, 15 years from now. What do you think the big changes we're going to see? What's Broadway going to look like? Maybe it looks the same.
Well, I'll be curious when they finally do a revival of Dear Evan Hansen and shows that I was in the first roundup. I'm going to be curious to see what, if anything, and how they've changed it. I have to assume even more technology, maybe adding in elements. Well, they'll figure out it'll be more cost effective to add in elements like at the Sphere. So if the house is landing on the stage, we'll all feel it. Unlike the 40 million that Netflix had to spend for Stranger Things, those cost factors will be brought down. So maybe it will be a more sensory experience because it'll just be easier and more cost effective to do it that way.
One person, living or past, that you would just kill to work with. Your dream collaborator.
I don't know that there's a dream collaborator. I'm just such a huge, if you have to just actor, Peter O'Toole has always been my absolute favorite actor. And about 20, maybe more years ago, I was at an event, a dinner, and he was still alive. But it was either his agent or manager happened to be at the table, and that came up. And he just said to me, "Oh, darling, have the memory of Peter that you have. He is not what you remember him." Everyone, anyway, I mean, those films from the 60s and 70s, I mean, what a brilliant actor. And there was just something ethereal, and I could watch Lawrence of Arabia. They could just keep, and some of his other films. So I don't know. I'm just saying, if you could ever just, I still would have loved to have had the opportunity, but his agent, Johnny, at the time was just like, "No, darling, you don't have."
And my last question. If you weren't producing, somebody said, "Okay, Wendy, no more Broadway, no more film, no more theater. You got to do something different." What would it be?
I'm really fascinated. I just went to a lecture last night on all the stuff that's going on with longevity, like all the new nutritional and things, and not, that I think we're living longer, but are we living longer better? And what are we doing from the inside out, and the development of products that, that it's not just, you need to have an exceptional amount of money to go to Switzerland and be redone. Things that, I think that I'm really interested in the technology of, how those things are going to be, 10, 15 years from now. What do we say? 60s, 40s, the new 60s, the new 40, is 80 going to be the new 30? I don't know. But I find that world kind of really fascinating, because the thought processes have really, have changed. And I think, doctors are getting better, are being more educated in nutrition and in other methods of, so I find that world totally fascinating.
Well, we'll have to invite you to more conferences, because we often have super interesting healthcare companies come and present here. Wendy, this has been a terrific discussion. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you taking the time. For me, everybody, Foolish Mortals Productions is Wendy's company.
If you want to know anything about what I'm up to, Foolish Mortals Productions.
Wendy Federman, ladies and gentlemen.
Great job. So